The numbers are staggering. The silence has been deafening, and the betrayal runs deeper than anyone imagined. Right now, hundreds of thousands of drivers are piloting ticking time bombs down America's highways, completely unaware that their engines were designed to fail. General Motors is facing an unprecedented crisis. As internal documents reveal, executives knew about catastrophic engine defects years before telling customers. The scandal has resulted in an $888 million settlement, but that's just the beginning of GM's nightmare. And yours if you own one of their V8-powered vehicles. What if the engine under your hood was deliberately engineered to self-destruct? What if GM knew about fatal flaws years before you signed the papers? And what if their so-called fix actually cost you thousands while protecting their bottom line? By the end of this video, you'll see exactly how America's largest automaker transformed engineering into extortion, warranties into weapons, and customer loyalty into a liability. This isn't just about defective engines. This is about a system that's been rigged against you from the moment you drove off the lot. And the evidence I've uncovered will make your blood boil. The Whisper Network breaks. It started in the shadows of online forums and hushed conversations between mechanics. A pattern too consistent to ignore, too alarming to dismiss. Engines weren't just wearing out prematurely, they were dying violent, sudden deaths that left families stranded and technicians baffled. Picture this. A $65,000 GM truck with fewer than 20,000 miles suddenly seizes on a busy interstate. No warning lights, no gradual symptoms, just catastrophic failure that transforms American engineering pride into 3 tons of dead weight rolling toward disaster. These weren't isolated incidents. Across the country, the same nightmare was playing out in different driveways, on different highways, affecting different lives. Owners who had invested their trust and savings in what they believed was proven GM reliability were discovering their vehicles carried a fatal flaw, one that the manufacturer had been tracking for years while saying nothing. A network of mechanics, dealership insiders, and former GM employees began connecting dots that painted a disturbing picture. Internal service bulletins referenced unusual wear patterns in active fuel management components. Warranty claims showed clustering around specific lifter and camshaft failures. And somewhere in Detroit boardrooms, executives were making cold calculations about liability timing and the cost of staying silent versus speaking up. What they discovered exposes not just a mechanical defect, but a corporate strategy that treated customer safety as just another variable in profit equations. The engine failures plaguing GM's V8 lineup weren't accidents. They were the predictable result of decisions made in conference rooms where quarterly earnings mattered more than the families depending on reliable transportation. But the mechanical failures were just the beginning. What happened next reveals how GM weaponized complexity to shift responsibility, delay accountability, and ensure that when the bill came due, it was the customer who paid. The engineering time bomb. Deep inside the heart of GM's most popular V8 engines lay a design philosophy that prioritized fuel economy numbers over long-term reliability. The pursuit of government-mandated efficiency targets led engineers down a path that would prove catastrophic for real-world performance. The specifications tell a story of compromise. Active fuel management systems that deactivated cylinders under light loads. Ultra-thin synthetic oils that flowed like water but provided minimal protection at high temperatures. Tighter clearances between moving parts that left no margin for error. Manufacturing processes that prioritized production speed over precision quality control. Every decision was justified by laboratory tests that bore little resemblance to the brutal reality of daily driving. Highway hauling, stop-and-go traffic, and the demanding conditions that define actual vehicle ownership. Internal documents now reveal that quality control engineers raised red flags about lifter failures, oil flow patterns, and thermal stress points years before the public heard about these issues. Their warnings painted a picture of engines that might excel in controlled testing environments but would inevitably fail under the variable loads that real drivers encounter. The metallurgy itself was questionable. Bearing surfaces showed microscopic irregularities. Oil passages contained manufacturing debris. Camshaft lobe hardening fell outside acceptable tolerances in a significant percentage of units. Each defect alone might have been manageable, but together they created a cascade of failure points that doomed these engines to premature death. Temperature mapping revealed another critical flaw. Under heavy load conditions, precisely when truck and SUV owners needed maximum reliability, oil temperatures spiked beyond the design parameters of the thin lubricant specified by GM. The result was oil starvation in critical areas, leading to bearing wear that accelerated exponentially once it began. GM engineers knew that the combination of these factors created engines that might run smoothly for months or years before experiencing sudden catastrophic failure. They also knew that by the time symptoms appeared, the damage was already irreversible. Yet production continued, and marketing materials continued to promise the durability and reliability that the engineering team knew their designs couldn't deliver. This wasn't incompetence, it was a calculated risk. The question wasn't whether engines would fail, but when. And in that timing lay the key to understanding GM's corporate strategy. Is your GM vehicle making the dreaded lifter tick? Comment with your model, year, and mileage below. It could save someone else from disaster. And if you think the engineering problems are disturbing, wait until you see how GM handled the growing crisis once engines began failing in customer vehicles across America. The Great Deception unfolds. When reports of engine failures began surfacing, GM's response followed a playbook refined through decades of crisis management. Deny the pattern, question the maintenance, suggest operator error. Above all, avoid acknowledging any systemic issue that might trigger widespread liability. Service departments received confidential training on how to deflect warranty claims. Owners reporting engine problems were told their cases were isolated incidents or abnormal usage patterns. Technical service bulletins were quietly distributed to dealers with instructions to perform specific diagnostic procedures designed to find alternative explanations for failures. The strategy was sophisticated and systematic. Create enough procedural obstacles that frustrated owners would abandon warranty claims. Delay repairs until warranty periods expired. When forced to authorize replacements, require extensive documentation that few consumers could provide. Every step designed to minimize financial exposure while maintaining plausible deniability about the scope of the problem. A former GM regional service manager speaking on condition of anonymity confirmed the approach. The directive was always to find a reason why it wasn't our responsibility. If the customer couldn't produce every oil change record with matching VINs, that was grounds for denial, even if the failure had nothing to do with maintenance. Meanwhile, production continued at full capacity. Marketing campaigns emphasized reliability and durability. Fleet sales targeted businesses that depended on vehicle uptime for their livelihood. The disconnect between internal knowledge and external messaging was complete and profitable. The human cost mounted daily. Families found themselves stranded in dangerous situations when engines failed without warning. Small business owners faced equipment failures that threatened their livelihoods. Fleet operators dealt with downtime that cascaded through their operations, affecting schedules, contracts, and customer relationships. Each failure created ripple effects far beyond repair costs. Lost wages from missed work, alternative transportation expenses, the psychological stress of losing faith in a major purchase. The financial strain of unexpected repair bills on vehicles that were supposed to be under warranty protection. But the most insidious aspect of the deception was yet to come. When public pressure finally forced GM to acknowledge the problem, their solution would prove to be another layer of the same strategy, shifting costs to consumers while protecting corporate interests. The way GM finally responded to mounting public pressure shows just how far they were willing to go to protect profits at the expense of their customers' financial security and safety. The illusion of the fix. When mounting pressure finally forced acknowledgement of the engine defects, GM's response seemed decisive. A comprehensive customer satisfaction program affecting hundreds of thousands of vehicles, free inspections and repairs, a public commitment to making things right with affected customers. The reality was far more cynical. Instead of addressing the fundamental design flaws that caused the failures, the fix consisted primarily of changing oil specifications. Owners were instructed to switch from the originally specified lightweight synthetic oil to a much thicker conventional formulation. Service departments replaced oil caps and updated owners' manuals to reflect the new requirements. On the surface, this appeared to be a reasonable engineering solution. Thicker oil would provide better lubrication under high-stress conditions and might extend the life of engines with marginal bearing clearances. GM presented laboratory data showing improved performance with the heavier lubricant. The hidden costs were substantial and immediate. The thicker oil created more internal friction, reducing fuel economy by 10 to 15% in real-world driving conditions. For owners who had purchased their vehicles based on advertised efficiency ratings, this represented a permanent reduction in one of the key performance metrics they had paid for, a penalty that would cost them thousands over the life of the vehicle. A Chevrolet Silverado that had been advertised as achieving 20 miles per gallon highway might now struggle to exceed 17. For high-mileage drivers, this difference meant spending an extra $100 to $200 per month at fuel pumps. Over a 5-year ownership period, that's up to $12,000 in additional costs that GM conveniently shifted to consumers. The resale impact was even more damaging. Used vehicle buyers began avoiding trucks and SUVs that showed evidence of the oil specification change, viewing it as a signal of underlying problems. Vehicles that underwent the recall fix saw their market values drop by thousands of dollars overnight. Insurance companies took notice as well, adjusting premiums based on the increased risk profile of affected vehicles. Some commercial fleet policies specifically excluded coverage for engine failures related to the known defects, forcing business owners to self-insure against catastrophic mechanical problems. The most troubling aspect of the fix was its timing. Industry analysts noted that the oil change would likely push most engine failures beyond the standard warranty period, effectively transferring financial responsibility from GM to vehicle owners. What appeared to be customer service was actually sophisticated cost shifting. It was genius in a diabolical way, explains automotive industry analyst Thomas Reynolds. By recommending heavier oil, they knew they were buying time. Just enough time for most engines to survive until warranty coverage expired. After that, it's the owner's problem, not GM's. And if the oil specification change wasn't cynical enough, wait until you see how GM turned its warranty process, supposedly designed to protect consumers, into a weapon against the very customers it was meant to protect. The warranty weapon. The warranty system designed to protect consumers from defective products became a weapon in the hands of corporate strategists determined to minimize exposure to legitimate claims. The mathematics were ruthless. Standard powertrain warranties covered 5 years or 60,000 miles, whichever came first. By implementing an oil change that delayed failures until just beyond these limits, GM effectively immunized itself against the majority of potential claims while maintaining the appearance of having addressed the problem. Owners who experienced failures at 62,000 miles found themselves facing repair bills that often exceeded $15,000. Replacement engines, labor costs, and related damage quickly accumulated to figures that represented a significant percentage of the vehicle's original purchase price. For many families, these unexpected expenses created genuine financial hardship. The warranty denial process was refined to an art form. Claims were subjected to extensive investigation that often took weeks or months to complete. Owners were required to provide maintenance records that many had not anticipated needing to preserve. Any gap in documentation became grounds for denial, regardless of the vehicle's actual condition or usage history. Service departments received training on how to identify alternative explanations for engine failures. Oil contamination could be blamed on extended service intervals. Bearing wear could be attributed to aggressive driving. Any evidence that might support an owner's claim was subjected to scrutiny that virtually guaranteed finding some basis for denial. For the small percentage of owners who successfully navigated the warranty process, the experience was often so frustrating and time-consuming that it served as a deterrent to others who might otherwise pursue legitimate claims. The message was clear. Even valid warranty claims would be met with bureaucratic obstacles designed to exhaust the patience and resources of all but the most persistent consumers. The human toll of this strategy was measured in broken trust, financial stress, and the grinding frustration of dealing with a system designed to wear down legitimate claimants. Families who had saved for years to afford a reliable vehicle found themselves facing unexpected expenses that threatened their financial stability. A Missouri family shared their story of buying a new GMC Sierra only to have the engine fail at 63,000 miles, just 3,000 miles outside warranty. The $15,000 repair bill wiped out their children's college fund. "We trusted GM," the father explained. "We never thought they would design something to fail like this." Has your GM vehicle failed just after the warranty expired? Share your repair costs and zip code below. The warranty denials and costly repairs created a groundswell of anger that would eventually translate into something GM hadn't anticipated, a legal reckoning that would cost them far more than simply fixing the problem properly would have. The legal avalanche. As evidence of the systematic nature of the engine defects accumulated, the legal landscape began shifting in ways that would ultimately cost GM far more than honest disclosure would have. The company that tried to save money through engineering shortcuts now faces financial consequences that dwarf those original savings. Class action lawsuits emerged in multiple jurisdictions, each seeking to represent thousands of affected owners. Legal teams assembled massive databases of failure reports, warranty claims, and internal GM documents that painted a damning picture of corporate knowledge and deliberate concealment. Discovery proceedings forced the disclosure of internal communications that revealed the true timeline of corporate awareness. Emails between engineers, executives, and legal teams showed that key decision-makers had been briefed on the defects years before any public acknowledgement. The contrast between internal discussions and external messaging provided powerful evidence of deliberate deception. Technical expert witnesses dismantled GM's claims about the adequacy of the oil change fix. Independent testing revealed that the fundamental design flaws remained unaddressed and that failures would continue to occur regardless of oil specifications. The recall was exposed as a delay tactic rather than a genuine solution. The financial exposure grew exponentially as courts granted class certification and consolidated cases across multiple states. Potential damages included not just repair costs, but diminished vehicle values, increased operating expenses, and punitive awards designed to deter similar conduct by other manufacturers. Regulatory investigations proceeded in parallel with the civil litigation. Federal agencies with oversight authority began their own examination of GM's disclosure timeline and recall procedures. The possibility of criminal charges against corporate executives emerged as investigators uncovered evidence of deliberate concealment of safety-related defects. State attorneys general, sensing political opportunity in a case that pitted corporations against consumers, launched their own investigations and enforcement actions. The legal pressure built from multiple directions simultaneously, creating a cascade of exposure that far exceeded the original cost of honest disclosure and proper remediation. GM's stock price reflected investor recognition that the legal costs would ultimately dwarf the original manufacturing savings that had motivated the defective design decisions. What had begun as cost optimization was transforming into a financial catastrophe that would impact shareholders, employees, and customers for years to come. The settlement, $888 million, represents one of the largest penalties in automotive industry history. Yet many analysts believe it's just the beginning, with total costs potentially exceeding $2 billion once all litigation is resolved. And as GM battles in courtrooms across America, their competitors aren't just watching, they're actively capitalizing on the reputational damage in ways that could permanently reshape the automotive landscape. The competitive feeding frenzy. While GM struggles with legal battles and public relations disasters, competitors have moved aggressively to capitalize on the reputational damage and market uncertainty. The scandal has created an opening that rivals are rushing to exploit, potentially changing market share dynamics for decades to come. Ford, Ram, and Toyota have launched advertising campaigns that subtly emphasize reliability and durability, coded messages that resonate with consumers who have lost faith in GM. Extended warranty programs have been introduced specifically to address concerns about engine longevity. Marketing teams have crafted messages promising transparency and accountability without explicitly mentioning GM's problems. We're seeing a fundamental shift in how truck and SUV buyers approach their purchase decisions, explains automotive marketing analyst Jennifer Williams. Reliability has become the #1 consideration, even above traditional factors like power, capability, or technology. That's a direct response to the GM scandal. Fleet customers, particularly sensitive to downtime and reliability issues, have begun shifting their purchasing patterns away from GM products. Large commercial accounts that represented steady revenue streams for decades have started exploring alternatives with Ford and Ram. The financial impact has been immediate and substantial as these high-volume customers represent some of the most profitable segments of GM's business. Dealer networks report that consumers are actively avoiding affected GM models even when offered substantial discounts. The stigma associated with the engine problems has contaminated the entire product line, forcing dealers to offer incentives that eliminate profit margins just to move inventory. The used vehicle market reflects similar dynamics. Resale values for affected models have collapsed as buyers demand steep discounts to compensate for perceived reliability risks. This has created a vicious cycle where current owners face unexpected depreciation losses, while potential buyers find little reason to choose the troubled vehicles over competing alternatives. Industry analysts note that the competitive damage extends beyond immediate sales losses. The incident has undermined GM's reputation for engineering excellence and manufacturing quality. Intangible assets that had been built over decades but could be destroyed in months. Rebuilding that reputation will require years of flawless execution and substantial investment in quality improvements. The talent drain may be equally problematic long-term. Engineers, designers, and executives have begun leaving for competitors who offer not just career opportunities, but also the chance to work for organizations that haven't compromised their professional reputations. The loss of institutional knowledge and experience could handicap GM's recovery efforts for years to come. Did you switch brands after experiencing GM engine problems? Tell us which manufacturer earned your business and why. Beyond the marketplace, the scandal's impact is being felt in Washington, where regulators and lawmakers are using the case to push for stronger consumer protections. The regulatory reckoning. Federal oversight agencies, initially slow to respond to the crisis, eventually mobilized investigations that could fundamentally reshape industry practices around defect disclosure and recall procedures. What began as an engineering problem has evolved into a regulatory showdown that may change how all automakers operate. Congressional hearings provided a public forum for affected consumers to share their experiences while subjecting GM executives to pointed questioning about their decision-making processes. The televised proceedings exposed the disconnect between corporate policies and consumer protection in ways that generated widespread public attention and political pressure for reform. The American people deserve to know when there's a potential problem with their vehicles, declared Senator Maria Cantwell during a particularly tense exchange with GM's CEO. This pattern of concealment and delay is unacceptable and potentially criminal. Regulatory agencies expanded their oversight authority and enforcement capabilities in direct response to the crisis. New requirements for defect reporting, recall implementation, and consumer notification were designed to prevent similar incidents from developing undetected for years before triggering public acknowledgement. The financial penalties imposed by regulators were structured not just as punishment for past misconduct, but as deterrents designed to ensure that future cost-benefit analyses would properly account for the risk of concealment and delay. The $888 million settlement represented one of the largest regulatory penalties in industry history. Criminal investigations explored whether corporate executives violated federal laws regarding consumer safety and securities disclosure. The possibility of individual accountability for corporate decision-making created new incentives for transparency and early intervention when safety issues emerged. International regulatory agencies used the crisis as justification for expanding their own oversight authority and enforcement capabilities. The global nature of automotive markets meant that reputational damage and regulatory scrutiny extended far beyond domestic markets, multiplying the long-term competitive disadvantages facing GM. Industry-wide changes in quality control procedures, warranty policies, and defect response protocols emerged as other manufacturers sought to avoid similar crises. The incident became a case study in business schools and regulatory agencies worldwide, ensuring that its lessons would influence corporate behavior for decades to come. But perhaps the most significant long-term impact of the crisis has been the transformation it triggered in consumer behavior, a fundamental shift that may permanently alter the relationship between manufacturers and buyers. The consumer awakening. Perhaps the most significant long-term impact of the GM engine scandal has been the transformation it triggered in consumer expectations and behavior around automotive purchases and ownership. A new era of vigilance has dawned, and it's changing how people buy cars. Social media networks that previously focused on enthusiast discussions have evolved into sophisticated information-sharing platforms where consumers track reliability patterns, share maintenance experiences, and coordinate responses to manufacturer misconduct. The democratization of information means that corporate attempts at concealment are far more likely to be detected and exposed by vigilant consumer communities. 20 years ago, a company could contain an issue like this, explains consumer advocate Michael Barnes. Today, a single owner can document their experience, share it online, and connect with thousands of others facing the same problem overnight. Corporate damage control can't keep pace with that. Purchasing decisions now incorporate new factors as consumers recognize that manufacturer reputation and warranty terms offer insufficient protection against systematic defects and corporate misconduct. Independent reliability data, long-term ownership costs, and manufacturer response to previous problems have become key considerations in vehicle selection processes. The financial literacy of automotive consumers has increased dramatically as the crisis educated buyers about the hidden costs of ownership and the limitations of manufacturer warranties. Consumers have learned to calculate total lifecycle costs rather than focusing solely on purchase prices and monthly payment amounts. Legal awareness has also expanded as consumers learn about their rights under warranty and consumer protection laws. The class action lawsuits generated widespread publicity about legal remedies available to victims of manufacturer misconduct, creating informed consumer communities that are far more likely to pursue aggressive legal strategies when problems emerge. The relationship between manufacturers and consumers has fundamentally shifted from one based on trust and brand loyalty to one based on verification and accountability. Consumers demand transparency, independent validation, and meaningful consequences for corporate misconduct in ways that previous generations of buyers did not. This awakening has created lasting changes in market dynamics that extend far beyond the immediate crisis. Manufacturers now face consumer bases that are more skeptical, better informed, and more willing to pursue aggressive remedies when their expectations are not met. The financial impact of this consumer shift may be the most painful long-term consequence for GM, a cost that continues to grow with no clear end in sight. The financial avalanche. The true cost of the engine defect crisis has exceeded even the most pessimistic initial projections as cascading effects multiply the financial impact across multiple business areas. What began as an engineering shortcut to save money has transformed into one of the costliest corporate missteps in automotive history. Direct recall costs, initially estimated in the hundreds of millions, quickly escalated as the scope of affected vehicles expanded and the complexity of remediation became apparent. The oil change solution, while cheaper than engine redesigns, still required dealer labor, documentation, and parts distribution across a massive service network. Legal settlements and regulatory penalties added another layer of financial exposure that continues growing as new cases emerge and existing litigation expands. The $888 million regulatory settlement is just one component of total legal costs that analysts estimate will ultimately exceed $2 billion when all civil litigation is resolved. Lost sales represent an ongoing drain on revenue that is difficult to quantify but impossible to ignore. Market share declines in key segments translate to billions in reduced revenue over the years required for reputation recovery. The competitive advantages gained by rivals during the crisis will prove difficult and expensive to recover. The impact on dealer networks has created additional financial pressures as franchises struggle with inventory that has become difficult to sell and service obligations that exceed normal profit margins. Dealer failures and network consolidation have reduced market coverage and increased distribution costs across remaining outlets. Stock price declines reflect investor recognition that the crisis will impact profitability for years beyond the immediate recall and settlement costs. The market capitalization loss has exceeded $10 billion at its peak, representing wealth destruction that affects pension funds, individual investors, and employee retirement accounts. Credit rating downgrades have increased borrowing costs for capital investments and operating financing, creating additional headwinds for recovery efforts. The higher cost of capital reduces GM's ability to invest in new product development and quality improvements at precisely the time when such investments are most critical for competitive recovery. For GM, the road back from this crisis will be long and expensive, a painful lesson in how cutting corners on quality can ultimately cost far more than doing things right the first time. So what happens next? Can GM rebuild trust, or is this just the beginning of a long decline for one of America's oldest corporations? The path forward. The engine defect crisis has forced a fundamental reconsideration of corporate priorities and business practices that will reshape GM's operations for years to come. The company's survival depends on whether these changes represent genuine reform or merely cosmetic adjustments designed to weather the current storm. Quality control procedures have undergone complete restructuring, with new oversight mechanisms designed to ensure that engineering concerns receive appropriate attention before reaching production. Independent quality audits, expanded testing protocols, and enhanced defect tracking systems have been implemented to prevent similar problems from developing undetected. Warranty policies have been expanded and simplified to reduce the bureaucratic obstacles that frustrated consumers during the crisis. Extended coverage periods, streamlined claim procedures, and proactive customer notification systems have been designed to rebuild trust through demonstrated commitment to customer protection. Corporate governance reforms include new reporting structures that ensure safety and quality concerns reach senior management without filtering or delay. Board-level oversight of quality issues and regulatory compliance has been enhanced to provide independent validation of management decisions and policies. The customer service organization has been rebuilt from the ground up with new training procedures and performance metrics focused on transparency and accountability rather than cost minimization. Service department policies have been revised to prioritize customer satisfaction and safety over short-term financial considerations. Product development processes now incorporate new stage gates and review procedures designed to identify potential quality issues before they reach production. Independent testing and validation have become standard procedures for all new powertrains and safety-critical systems. The long-term success of these reforms will ultimately depend on sustained management commitment and organizational culture change that prioritizes customer safety and satisfaction over short-term financial performance. The crisis has demonstrated the ultimate cost of compromising these priorities, but organizational memory tends to fade as new challenges emerge and new leaders take responsibility for strategic decisions. For consumers, the crisis has provided lasting lessons about the importance of independent information, legal awareness, and collective action in holding corporations accountable for their products and policies. The awakening of consumer vigilance and activism represents perhaps the most important long-term outcome of the entire crisis. Would you consider buying a GM vehicle today? Vote in the comments, yes, no, or only with extended warranty. The bottom line. The GM V8 engine scandal exposed more than mechanical defects. It revealed a system where corporate interests routinely override consumer safety, where profits take priority over the families who depend on these vehicles for transportation. The $888 million penalty is just the beginning. Real change requires vigilant consumers who refuse to accept corporate excuses and demand accountability at every level. The documents, testimonies, and legal proceedings we've examined tell a story of corporate calculation gone wrong, a strategy that valued short-term savings over long-term reputation and customer welfare. The damage to GM's brand may last for generations, long after the financial penalties have been paid and the defective engines have disappeared from roads. For current owners of affected vehicles, the path forward remains uncertain. Class action settlements may provide some relief, but many will continue to drive with the knowledge that their engines could fail catastrophically at any moment. The psychological burden of that uncertainty represents an incalculable cost that no financial settlement can address. For potential buyers, the lesson is clear. Research goes beyond features, performance, and price. Understanding a manufacturer's history of handling defects and honoring warranties may be the most important research you can do before making a purchase decision. You've just seen the truth about GM's V8 engine scandal that the company desperately hoped would stay buried in technical service bulletins and confidential emails. Now you know why thousands of owners are enraged and why GM's attempts to make things right may be too little. Too late.